I'm going to stand at first because I'm going to show you some of my work before I do a demo. And it's just nice when I can look out and see everybody. And just wave your hand if you're not hearing me, and I'll speak up even louder. Yeah, so like Nancy Jo said, I teach. I didn't start teaching art until maybe 6-7 years ago. I was a graphic designer most of my life. And now I'm out of that, and I'm painting full time. I'm one of the founding members of Pittsford Fine Art, which is a gallery in Pittsford. If you haven't been there yet, I hope you'll come by. It's got 23 artists, and we take turns working there and showing our original work. So I'm teaching virtually. I had a class this morning, and that started, of course, with COVID, like everything did. I was getting ready to teach an in-person class when COVID hit. I had to stop, so I figured it out in my very simple way, but it works. And now I have people from all over the country, so I kept it going because everybody wanted to keep going, but then I'm also teaching in Pittsford at the Rec Center. There, I'll have a class tomorrow morning. I don't teach there in the summers, but because the kids take over when they're not in school. But so I'm busy with that, and I'm busy with my own painting. I paint in oil, acrylic, and watercolor. I paint in oil primarily outside for plein air painting, and then my studio painting is usually watercolor. And as she said, I love painting in watercolor. I love the way the brush works. I love the way things flow and all the different things you can do with it. But it can be challenging if you don't know the way to do it, you know. So how many of the people here paint in watercolor? Fair number. Yeah. Okay.
Learning.
Great. Great. So let's look at a few paintings. These are mostly recent paintings. When I say recent, they're probably most of them the last couple of years, and I just pulled some.
I have to figure it out.
And we'll just get started here. So this was from one of my virtual classes when I've given my class an assignment, and I wanted everybody to, like have to put their composition together between one class and the next, and I also do it so that I can then demo things. So they had to use eggs, and they had to use a couple different things, like fabric or whatever. And while I was setting mine up, and I was done for the most part, carried across the kitchen and dropped the eggs. So I grabbed a light. I mean, it was just like a lamp in your house, and I put it down on the floor. I got down on the floor and I tried all these different angles. I just used my cell phone for my camera.
Nice.
And I painted this, and it's been in many shows and won different awards. It was in the Adirondack National Watercolor Show last year. I think this was the one. Anyway, I got a kick out of it because it's called Accidental Still Life.
What size is it?
It's not that, it's like 10 by 10 or 12 by 12, I forget which. Not that big. And then painting white on white is always interesting, trying to use those really subtle colors. I try not to use just gray or black. Everything's made up of colors, so you let a little bit more violet show, or you let a little bit more of blue show, whatever, rather than just using gray. Okay. One of the things that really draws me to paint is the light coming through something. Backlighting is always really intriguing. Whatever the light is doing, it's creating that piece of like little sculptures. These cabbages were like little sculptures out there, and the light coming through, making some of it that sagey kind of blue or green, and then blue green, and then the bright yellowy green with it. That was what was interesting to me. This also got in that same show, the Adirondack show, but a different year. This is called Catering Calendars. And if you look at the one on the right, you can see kind of how I was trying to get the metallic look and picking up it's important for me to pick up what's warm and what's cool and like play off of each other. So you see how the yellow or gold, and then the blues and the purples and pinks and shape the piece. And then I had really a lot of fun with those dots.
Yeah.
In fact, I made the mistake of doing them too soon, and then I had to do them again. Like I had to go back and do them again.
Did you do the dots all in watercolor with a brush?
Oh yeah.
Yeah? Wow.
Oh yeah. Because they're not
Fantastic.
really all round, you know. Some of they're mostly like different shapes according to
Sure.
the shape of the piece.
It's fantastic.
And this is a new piece I'm just taking to the framer tomorrow, and it's fairly big. And if you can look at, this is my dining room and the cherry tree out in the backyard. And then I brought in some of the branches that I trimmed off, and it just kind of felt like an Asian bouquet. It just felt very Japanese or something. And I think part of it was just the grid on the windows, you know, so you have the squares and then you have these branches coming out. So this was a lot of fun to do. And it's funny because that just, of course, everybody that has cherry trees, you know, it just ended. So I had the same kind of thing going on a week or two ago. But I loved being able to see the real tree out there through the windows. But the challenge of this was primarily the table. Because if you notice, there's like cool light coming in on the right where the door is. It's like light coming through that door. And then there's another, like a screen porch between the tree and the dining room. So it sends a different kind of light here. And then there's another window on the side, and it's sending shadows of the chairs. And I had to try to break it into pieces without making it look too chopped up, you know. So that was challenging.
Wow.
This is a triptych that I've only finished this piece so far. But my cousin, who's no longer alive, he had lived with my aunt and his dad in Japan when he was little. And so he had, I just got into my hands a couple of years ago, this little kimono for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. And it's just beautiful. It's like padded or quilted rather than just the thin little material that you see lots of times. And I just fell in love with this kimono, and then I started like building off of that, and I found a bird's nest that had to come down off my mother's house before we sold the house. And so I used that, and I created the bluebird coming, and the little boy is reaching out. It's my he doesn't look like that, he's got blonder hair, like light hair. But he was my model. I had him reaching up to and I put it inside a house and created the wallpaper to just make it, like there's so much pattern going on with the kimono, and I just kind of wanted to build in all this pattern. And he's reaching up trying to get that baby bird. This one's called Curiosity. And then the next painting that I've got about halfway through, and they're about this big. He's holding the bird. He's got the baby bird down, and the mother's on his head, kind of watching. And he's got this expression. And now I forget. I think I was going to call that wonder, or I forget what I was going to name that one. And then the final one is imagination, and he's going to be lifting off the ground, and his kimono is going to be turning into feathers, and he's imagining he's flying, and he's, you know, it's weird to have this in the house, but like, you know, with the fireplace and everything. But I did it so that the person looking at it is curious too, right? And it's about the curiosity of the child. But anyway, I'm looking forward to having all 3 of them at some point in time. Hopefully this year. I'm hoping to do them this summer.
Cool.
This is an Adirondack painting. It was really early morning. My sisters and I were up there. We got up and went out to this little, I think it was either a big pond or very little lake. I'm not sure which, but we've just about froze up there because we were so early, but we got to catch the fog and the light, and it was really fun.
Oh, wow.
And then my husband and I'd never been to the Thousand Islands because I lived in Wisconsin most of my adult life. So we've been back this way in New York for about 10 years now. And finally we got up there. So we had just gotten to Clayton. Clayton.
Lovely place.
And we just got to the hotel there, and we'd gone through lots of rain, and then all of a sudden, like right before the sun goes down, of course, right? You get that golden, they call it the golden hour, but this was like minutes. And I looked out the window, I said, I've got to get down to the dock. So I ran down and quick snapped a bunch of shots. It was gone so fast. But I really had a bigger painting in mind. I did this sort of as a tester to see how to handle certain things. So this is probably 12 by 18, and then the next one is a full width of a paper, well, about 28 inches.
Wow.
So there's the one with more boats, but I worked out some of the issues with the first one.
Like what issue?
Well, like how to handle different parts of it, that, you know, when you've got smooth things and you've got distinct shapes and you've got light, and how to keep the worms in the cools. You don't want green water where you want gold, you know, things like that.
Do you keep
So-
track of the hours spent on a piece like this? How many
How
hours
many
it takes?
on this bigger piece?
Yeah.
Well, this one had a lot more detail than some of mine. Yeah, I don't do it all at once.
Right,
I
right.
would just maybe say 20 hours, something like that.
Mark, could you go back to the first one? Just one
Only if
quick-
she says I can.
Can we go back to the?
Anything for Jerry. Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, and I'm going to be, everybody's invited. I happen to be the featured artist at the gallery in July, so I'll probably have some of this newer work there, especially the boats. And this was a piece I was doing for a demo for one of my classes. I usually like to have something that I can show of this, how you do this technique. And one of the people in the class bought it before I ever got it framed. So that was kind of nice, although I kind of missed it, you know, I didn't even really have it done and it was gone. But I love doing close-ups of things, so that's, again, it's probably, well, it's probably half a sheet, watercolor sheet.
That's big.
But it was dried hydrangea, so the colors were really interesting to me, those kind of mauve-y colors with golds and greens and things.
Oh, wow.
And this was my favorite plant for a few years. It's a escargot begonia. It's got that
wow.
spiral, and I just loved this plant. So I couldn't stand to have it die in the winter, and I would bring it in, keep it going all winter. And then right after I painted it, it died. So, but I have, well, actually, this sold too, but I have a picture of it. But what I loved about it, it has like these little delicate magenta around the edges, and then it has so many colors of greens, and I mean, it's just a beautiful plant.
This is all brushwork, this is not watercolor pencil at all?
No, it's just brush.
Oh, yum.
This is actually a demo that I had my virtual class do, and we hadn't done anything like this before, but it was fun, and it came out looking like a croissant. So it's not a painting so much as it was a demo, but it's kind of fun. We had to mask off the grid and then go back in later and fill in most of it. And I masked off, when I say mask, it's like a fluid
Yeah.
that will mask it. Just the little dots and things that you see in little teeny creases on top. The rest of it, I didn't. But that was fun to do. And this is a little bit looser, but I was painting in oils in Highland Park a couple weeks ago, and it was predicted to be windy that day, but I thought I was getting there early enough that I could miss the wind. And I dragged my oil paints all around, I was pretty tired by the time I started here, which was like the corner of Highland and Goodman. Like that main entrance with the little flowers at the beginning. And I walked all through the park and through all kinds of things, and finally came back to this place I started. And I'm painting in oils, and I'm about halfway through the painting, and I have a pochade box that, my painting's here. It was just a little 8 by 10, and then the box is just a little bit bigger than that with my paints in it, and the wind went, But I had taken a photo of the scene, and so I went home and I painted it in watercolor. And then while I was walking around trying to figure out where I wanted to go, I took this photo. I worked from a photo that same afternoon. I did these two in that afternoon. And these are the azaleas, but I also loved the way the light hit the side of the tree. It was very contrasting too.
Oh.
This was a tree down in Mendon Ponds, and I was looking at the water, and then when I turned around, the light was just perfect backlighting this tree, so I wanted to try painting that too.
So what did you use to create the dark value there? Do you recall?
Well, it's probably a really dark green, but I don't just use one color. Usually I'm throwing other things in while it's wet and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of machine paintings. Most of my machine paintings, which have sold, so I don't have them anymore, but they're, except for a tractor I have, and what else do I have? I have two still, that are done in acrylic, and they're bigger. And then I decided to do a few of them in watercolor too. And so this is one of, it's a smaller watercolor. And then the next one was a little bit bigger, and it was, this was in,
Wow.
so maybe the A one was last year, 2 years ago. Anyway, this was in a few shows, the Adirondack show, I think, and the Philadelphia Watercolor Society show, international show, I think. But anyway, it's a mining machine from Colorado.
Mm.
I lived in Colorado for a few years, but it was on a trip back afterwards that there's a mining museum, and even though it was closed that day, they had a bunch of things outside. So that's why I could have some light hitting things, you know. It was outside, whereas you'd never see it that way in real life, I don't think. But I loved, like, there were hints, where there were hints of color, I just pushed the color a little bit. But those colors were there, where you see the blues or the yellows or the pinks, they were there, and then I just emphasized them a bit.
Mm.
And we had gone to Italy, well, a couple times, but this time was Cinque Terre.
Cinque
I don't think I can say it right,
Terre,
but we'd been there, it's been quite a few years, maybe 12 years or something. But it took me till last year before I painted it. I don't know why. But anyway, that's a bigger painting too, that sold to a woman who lives on Lake Ontario. And this, another recent painting, very recent, I haven't shown it anywhere yet, but it was from the same trip. I just love the rich, warm colors, and then the clothes hanging out. I don't know what it is about hanging clothes, but it's always appealing. I painted them locally, and then I painted a couple of them from Italy. And last year I participated in a plein air event in Clifton Springs, and I came across a lotus pond and talked the owners into letting me paint there, which was so much fun. This is not that painting. That painting sold and won Festive Show, so super excited. But I couldn't wait to paint in watercolor because the colors felt like I just wanted to capture them in watercolor. So I've done a couple paintings from the lotus pond. This one, again, is like 12 by 18, I did 12 by 16 or 18. And then the next one, I think, Mark, is a bigger one, just to show the pond in the background. But what was really interesting, it was past the time of the blossoms, and it left the pods, and they were in these beautiful colors. They were starting to dry, but they weren't brown yet. Some of them might have been, but most of them were either green or pinks. They were beautiful colors.
Wow.
Another really, I love going really close up and really studying the flowers. So this was out of a bouquet that had been for my mom, and I captured it one day, and then a year or two later decided to paint it. Today I'm going to demo doing something similar. I won't get through a whole painting, but these jars, canning jars, the trick here was getting enough light to come into the jars, pretty much from the side and behind, I think, to make them sort of come to life. And then, the fabric. Sometimes I'll paint, I like painting striped fabric. It's really fun, but I don't have tons of different fabrics, so I'll often just I'll have a red and white stripe something, and I'll just change the color. So that's probably the case here. I just made it more of a teal. This is another painting that I didn't frame until recently, so I haven't shown this yet either, but again, zooming in really tight and treating it like they're all little orbs, they're little sculptures, and it's just the light and the bounced, reflected color going up into that top onion from the red onions below. Those kind of things are really fun to catch. This is new. This is another one that I did smaller first because I hadn't painted a lot of things like this, but I'd set this up. The only place I could find the light was coming in strong. It was like my bed, and I put a mirror on my bed, and I fiddled around with it so I get the light coming the right way. going into this glass vase to catch enough of the light. But I practiced with a smaller one, and I was trying something different with the background too, which I won't get into right now. And then I did a larger one that has a few more pieces. Is the next one, I think. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's more like this. And again, I think these will be in the show in July.
Go back one.
Yeah, what did you have them sitting on that they were reflecting? like that?
mirror.
You had them on the mirror.
I
Okay.
just
Yeah.
had this mirror. It was
All
like
right.
one of those mirrors that hooks on the back of a closet.
Yeah.
The trick is, all these other things are going on in the background, right? I didn't have like a perfect photography background. So then it's throwing different things into the mirror, and then you have to kind of try to make it up and
Yeah.
guess. And, but anyway, they were fun. A few summers I have done workshops down, the Art Center of Yates County has a place called Sunny Point on Cuca Lake. And so I've done 3-day workshops down there, and this was from last year when we did florals down there. And so this is the screen porch right there on the lake, and just getting natural light. Lots of times I've found it makes a really interesting floral painting to get a lot of natural sunlight coming right down through. I have a couple other ones that will show you how that can work. This piece got me signature membership in the Philadelphia Watercolor Society. So I love it for that reason, but I don't usually expect florals to get into shows, but I put it in there as you know how you can enter 3 or something like that. And I was kind of surprised they picked the floral. But anyway, so that was exciting. But the trick with this, just almost impossible, it was impossible, but I did my best, but still couldn't capture that color. Like if you've seen these, the purpley blue, vibrant colors these clematis are almost impossible to capture. But I tried. I did lots of thin layers, you know, rather than putting on one color. So there's lots of different colors going on, but thin layers so it didn't look heavy. And this was another fun piece. Again, this is pretty big, full sheet size. And I had done a plein air study of it about this big, and fell in love with the plant. And then I knew I wanted to take my time with it and be more careful and actually just show. I loved the cool greens were on top, you know, even though usually you think of the sun warming something up, the cool greens were on the top of this plant. And the yellowy warm greens were on the bottom side, along with all the red stems and everything. I just thought it was the coolest plant. Here's my dining room again. Only this now I have rhododendrons on my table right now. These are from last year, but the same color, rhododendrons from outside of the house. But again, you know, like this wasn't as complicated, the table, you know, but I did still have to try to get the light coming down and the shapes made by the grids and things. I think I'm taking too long talking. Okay, this was last week. I had my in-person class. All try to, you know, do still life objects just to learn more about painting metals or fabrics and how to, you know, just achieve different textures and things. So there was on the right and running along behind there is a scarf that was sort of translucent. So that shows the lace that I've got underneath. And then that old silver sugar bowl that's kind of tarnished. And then I had a copper vase and an onion, but they all could pick from different things. And this was just what I used for one of my examples. My sister's got a farm, so I get all kinds of resources from her, but this is one of her chickens. And then these are all little 6x6 watercolor paintings that I mounted on a board and varnished rather than putting under glass. I just wanted to try that, and it was easy to try it with the smaller ones, and it worked. I don't know if any of you have done that, but I live near Seneca Park, so every year there are swans and cygnets, and I've taken lots of photos to work from that. And this was another virtual class where we usually practice water. You know, in one class I usually try to teach wet on wet, which would be water or sky, would be like we could kind of alternate. And so this one was, water, but shallow enough you see some things, catching the reflection of the bird, and the reflection always comes straight down towards the viewer, and then the shadow, which goes opposite wherever the light's coming from. So you get both of those in there. And this is another thing this photo was from probably 15 years ago in Florida, but I finally got around to just, I thought it was a beautiful bird, so I painted this recently. And this I set up the still life outside, like I was talking about, with the bright sunlight. And what I loved is the shapes, the very distinct shapes of the flowers throwing the shadows, which I never like to paint my shadows just gray, right? They have colors, and then I just sort of push that color. So it was fun, and that was a scarf I borrowed from my sister just to have some options for things. So that's called the borrowed scarf, this painting. And then this one I'm going to show you the step by step. So this was about getting your florals to glow. So it's all about lighting, but I'll just show you the process very quickly. I have a step by step here to show you. So I had my photo, and I do a lot of correcting in my computer. And then I throw a grid on my painting in the computer, but you could hand draw it. But it's easier for me to do it that way. And I'm making lots of corrections then, taking things out, whatever, if I need to. But in this case, I'm working straight from this, and then you can go to the next one, Mark. And then I do my drawing using the grid to make sure I'm accurate, and also all the time editing. So I might say, oh, well, this is confusing here, I'm going to leave it out. All those, as I'm going through, as I'm drawing it. And then I transfer it down onto the watercolor paper, so it's just a nice clean line. And I start painting. So I start in watercolor, light to dark is more common. And so what I do is I can't see it here as much, but in person you would be able to tell. I'm putting yellow down wherever, instead of just painting a green on the pods that are below and the stems, putting yellow down under there to give it some life, because there's yellow in the green, right? So I'm painting a cooler yellow, which would be like a lemon yellow, something like that, for the areas that are going to turn green, and then I've got more of an orangey yellow that I'm starting to paint in the flower where it's going to be orange. And then I'm scribbling in very roughly. I don't have to keep it exact. I don't want a nice smooth background. It's going to be all plants back there. So I'm just getting that cool green back there.
And you're not using any masking fluid, you're just doing
No.
this all around the lines?
I don't think there's any in this.
No, it didn't look like.
Okay, and then I'm skipping kind of, because I've had to work each petal separately because there's so many different parts. But do that, and then I'm darkening some of the background, and then I'm going to finish up the stems, and you can see how that green goes over the yellow and just kind of makes them come to life more.
And the lifting much or no?
Especially in the background I am. In the background I'm using a lot of lifting to get those plants. I want some of them to be soft. I don't want them all to be perfect. So I think that's it. Let's see.
Yep.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to demo tonight as far as I can go, and I'm sure I won't get it done. But I'll see what I can do.
Yay!
Remember your mic. Buy me a better camera.
All right, so this is what I put together this weekend, where I set this up last week and took a few photos and decided, I didn't want too many elements in here, but they're a little bit complex. So I'll probably just do one jar, we'll see, and maybe some of the fabric. So this is the grid I worked from, and I will just use it for my reference, although often I'll also have I have a screen this big that's sitting up on another desk, and I stand at a drawing table that's slightly tilted and standing up. But I can refer to that for color. It's sometimes almost always better color or more detail that I can refer to it. But this is good to work from for the most part, till I get into things I don't quite understand, and then I might need to examine screen version more. So that's just what I did. I drew it up from this, drew it up to that size with my grid. And then when I transfer it down, I transfer, because I've sketched it in pencil, and I transfer it in ink so that I can tell where I started and stopped. That's all that's about, and it just works as a good protector. So this afternoon I decided I would put the background in. It might be a little bit easier to put the first level of the background. I typically work the whole painting. I don't just finish one part of the painting typically. And I was just going to do the jar just for the demo, but I thought without something in the background it just feels kind of lost. So I went ahead and I typically put in like a 50% of where I'm going to be. So it's going to be a pretty dark background, but not completely black. I just put in, there's a bug. Anyway, it's like plein air painting. You end up with bugs in your oil paint.
Yeah.
So I've got something down here for my first layer, so it's not glaring white, and so you can kind of see the outline and everything. Okay. And let's see. So, I mean, I'm figuring this out as I go. I didn't have this all figured out. Heck.
Do you always work flat on a table, or do you use
No, I
these as
usually have a slight tilt.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And I could put a paper towel under it, but this is fine for what I'm doing. I always tilt it a lot when I'm doing the background, right? Because you want gravity to help you.
Mhm.
And I flipped this upside down and worked around and moved it around, right? But right now, with what I'm doing here, I think it'll be just as easy. I have masked out the letters, and I've masked out the hot spots. Now, in nature, I try not to mask. Sometimes there'll be like sparkles on the water. It's just easier to mask. You're not going to try to paint around that with watercolor. You'll just end up with you'll have too many brush strokes and everything for what you want. So, if I don't want to have to work around something, it just makes it really simple. Now, to mask it, I can keep working right there without worrying about it. And I would typically start with my lighter color, and this is all pretty much, these are peaches. I put them in a different jar than they were originally in because it had the...
She has to be able to see.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. The lights can turn down a little bit.
Oh, I see. Dial it down.
And
Is that bad for you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. There aren't too many colors going on here, but... so I just go for like what's the closest thing to start with. My first layer, I might not get too fussy with my colors. They might be straight out of the tube. But then I'm finessing it as I go usually. So that first layer that goes down, I might just do this like, okay. So I got that. I'm going to add a little bit of my warm red so I have something else that I can, and I can just kind of throw it around like this to begin with. So I sort of map out my painting.
Painting went on wet like this.
Yeah, so this is like puddles of color, right? And I map it out so that I don't finish one spot until I've got everything covered usually. But I'm at least paying attention to, this is like a studying it, so I know, I've got to like make it more dull here and brighter here. And if there's a color that, like in this jar, I see the yellow that's coming off of these peaches, it's more yellowy down here. So instead of making that just any old gray, I'll just go ahead and put that yellow in there, and then I'll come over it with another color later and adjust it. But then it's got that tone already there. And when I take that masking fluid off, which I probably won't get to tonight, but when I take it off, I'm going to go back in and cover up most of it, because if you look at the photo, and I don't know how much you can see.
I can hold it up to the camera.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
If you look at the photo, you really don't see the letters that much. I don't want it to be really like too overdone. So I've kind of masked most of it, but I know that I'm going to go back in and fill in a lot of it, and at least it's there for me, and I don't have to worry about it as I'm working. So I kind of went out of my lines here, but that's okay because it's got color there. And then, I'm not going to do this, but if I was doing this at the same time, I would come right over here with my yellow and come right over here where I see some of it here. but I think I'm gonna leave that, and just try to focus on one jar. And I could grab different colors of yellow, like it's gonna have to get more intense, which means I'm gonna have to do more layers. I could say, okay, this is gonna be, like I have a hands of yellow medium that I might throw in here and there, and then my hands of yellow deep, or new gamboge, which I could add some of that red to get some of the darker areas. All right, well, I'll just get that in for the most part as it is, and then keep moving. I always have a cloth. I could use, and I have paper towel nearby just to take the moisture out of my brush after I wash it out and just adjust things. Now this is mostly water. I'm just thinning it out, so I just have a little bit of that yellow there, which won't look yellow when I'm done with it. Okay. And then up here I got too carried away, so I'm taking water again, taking most of the moisture out of it, and I'm just kind of getting rid of that harsh edge. It'll be gray here, won't matter too much. But it will be warmed up a little bit by doing that, so it wasn't really a problem. When I see up at the top of the jar, I see lots of yellow. I can just go ahead and throw some of that in. This is way too intense, so I'm going to just pull some of it off. But
Do you mix colors on the palette as well as on the canvas?
I do. But in this case, like this first layer, I don't
Right,
worry
right.
about it as much.
Sure.
And lots of times too, while it's wet, I'll be dropping in other colors here.
Mhm.
Now, there's lots of blue going on. It's kind of a blue-gray in the tops of this jar. It's showing the background through here. So I don't want to get too much yellow in some parts, or it will end up looking greenish, which I don't really want. And I have these rusty metal, what do you call them?
The fasteners or whatever.
Yeah, those metal things that you move up and down. So there's sort of, I've got like a burnt sienna. It's actually not burnt sienna, but it's something close to burnt sienna here that I might just add a little bit here and there to kind of get some of that rusty color in there right away.
What paper do you usually use?
So I either use Arches, this is Arches, I'm pretty sure, or I use Fabriano. I use both of those. Fabriano, just recently, I like how soft it feels at times, but then I had trouble with one thing I was trying to do with it, so now I'm back. I usually tell my students to get Arches, 140-pound Arches cold press.
What do you use for landscape?
I like, it's called,
Can you repeat the question so it's picked up?
oh, sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay.
Nancy Jo wanted to know what I use for my masking fluid, and I tried all different kinds, and it's impossible to keep them all working. But I do like, I think it's, I don't know how to pronounce it, PBO?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
EBI.
I like it because it's a little bit thinner,
Mhm.
so it doesn't make such a thick edge to it, and you can be a little bit more delicate. And then in my stuff over there, I keep a little container with soap in it. So I take a brush that's not a perfect brush, like it's not the best brush I ever had, and I'll just take and then you just wet it, and you just rub it right in the soap. And then I pour a little bit of the masking fluid onto the lid of that container. I don't reach right down into the masking fluid. But while the soap's still on here, then I pick up my masking fluid and put it down. And that's so that it doesn't wreck your brush all the way. The soap keeps it from ruining your brush.
Good tip.
You can, they make them with tubes, like little metal tubes and wires in them, and I tried those, and for a while I thought they were great, but then there's always a point not too far after I start using it where it stops working. So that I just go back to the brush. So I'm just kind of looking around and seeing, like, I should wet each area a little bit more, but picking out different areas that I see maybe some rust colors. And I didn't mask this way, I probably should have. So now I got to remember, it's anything that's not already down on your drawing probably won't end up on your painting. It's really hard while you're in the middle of painting to remember, oh, I got to leave this spot here. So I should have masked a little bit more there. Okay, so this, like I said, this is first layer, so I might as well go ahead and do some of the gray blue that I see. And I love working with Indentron blue. You guys familiar with that?
With what?
Indentron blue. It's like an indigo color. And it's just a really strong, rich color. It's good for backgrounds. You know, you can get a lot of punch out of it. But
I'm
it's
still not sure what you're saying.
it's spelled INDANTHRONE.
No wonder.
Yeah.
I think.
Thank you.
But anyway,
Weird name.
you know, I used to have Payne's Gray. I don't have Payne's
It
Gray,
looks like Payne's Gray.
but it's a little bit
It's
bluer,
brighter.
and
It's the color of your
I
shirt.
like the way it goes down.
It's almost the color of your shirt.
Is it?
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay, so anyway, I'll just use a little bit of that because it's already a blue that's grayed out. And then you know, you probably know this, but I'll just throw it out there that if you want to tone down a color, you use its opposite on the color wheel to do that, just a tiny bit of it. So if I want to gray down my blue, I can grab some of the orange that I had out here. In this case, I have some burnt sienna. Can you still hear me? Oh, there.
You could.
And now I've got a little bit more of I put a little orange, you color it, and now it's even grayer. So I can kind of use both of those things. I can use it really blue or have some gray in there. And I'm going to just I want it to kind of be puddly and loose without covering everything up. Over here. It's going to almost disappear against the background probably.
Do you tend to use one specific brand or type of paint, or do you?
Oh, yeah, I use Daniel Smith primarily. I think I've just used it so long, you know, I'm more familiar with it. It's a really good paint. I'm sure there's lots of good kinds, but that's what I'm most used to. I do have some other ones, like there's Core. I like Core. It's QOR.
Okay.
Really
What makes
rich,
that?
really rich colors. I like the quinacridone colors, which are, you know, different brands have quinacridones, but love those. And for a while I was hearing that quinacridone was going to be impossible to get, and so they're going to stop making it. But I listened to a talk by Daniel Smith people, and they said they plan ahead so much. They've got quinacridone for I think another 15 years, even if it does run out. They've got so much in stock.
Yeah, I just bought some.
Yeah,
I know.
Why
They
would
made a
you
big
run
deal
out?
about it. Yeah.
Why? I think it's hard to get the material. I don't even know. It's but it used to be used a lot for cars or something, and they're kind of running out. I don't know. So again, I didn't put masking fluid where I see strong highlights, so now I gotta try to paint around it, which was not real smart. I think I thought I was done when I wasn't. So now I have to just kind of poke around it a little bit more. I can just take, there's some water, or there's color on my brush, but I'm kind of taking just this for water and then adding it, then I'm going to throw some paint down into the water. There's already some color in there, which I don't mind because that's the color I'm going to be putting down. But I'm avoiding the little metal strap thing, whatever that is called. Even though that might have a gray color too, just so I can kind of find my way around. If I fill that in the very same color, I'll have trouble keeping track of it. All right, so while this is wet, I'm going to just come in with some more blue-gray.
Don't mind me.
Okay. And I might even add a little bit of purple, it's just, sometimes just to make it more interesting, you want to just see a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Not just all one color. But how nice that I don't have to work around these little highlights here. When you're doing something smooth like glass, you really need to have that be nice and smooth.
Pull the camera off and get closer just for a minute because the colors don't come out too late.
Oh, are they kind of faded?
Yeah.
That's way better.
Yeah, I can't
Stay
stand
there.
her like this hard.
Why not, Mark?
But, you know, you kind of go with it while it's wet, before it dries all the way, adding different things. Until you feel like it's getting out of control. Then you can let it dry, and then you can come back and wet it again and do some more of that. Rather than have just a hard edge here and a hard edge there. So I want a little bit more of a gray than what I've got. A little maybe too blue there, so I'm going to add some more of my orange. And get a little darker down in here. Now when the background gets done, the final background is going to be much darker, so it will make more sense if this is darker. The peach edge isn't very nice. And it looks like the jars weren't all that clean either. They're kind of dusty looking, so I have to pretend they're better than that. I'm still using a fairly big brush right now, but I'm about ready to switch. This is a number 12. And probably I'll switch to this. I have a number 10 with me here, this round. But in general, like, you want to work with the biggest brush that you are comfortable with what you're doing, because with watercolor it's all about, you know, how much water is in your brush, and you know, you don't have to keep going back and forth and back and forth if you can hold more water in your brush.
If you weren't demonstrating and you were painting in your studio, would be working the entire paper with color
Yes,
at this
I would
point?
be doing all of this, and then I would come back and start like shaping these and
Yeah,
stuff.
work it all at the
Um,
same time.
Yeah, because I like to have it all plotted out, and also the first layer I put down kind of breaks that surface more, and the next layer goes on nicer. So I usually just put whatever the lightest color in that area is. So it doesn't have to be super light, but the lightest of that color. Maybe what I'll do right now is I'm going to just throw in a few more colors here. A bit more white. I can just press that right out of there while it's wet, if I don't want it in there. I'm going to come back and shape some of the peaches and sort of show that. Alright. Okay, so now I'm going to look at, well, maybe what I should do is put what's going to shape the lower part is the bottom of this is more of a brownish. I use some of the reddish orange, and I'll come down here and just get some of these edges in.
Do you select a certain palette for each painting,
I use
or does
this palette for everything, but if I'm painting flowers, I will go pull other colors that I don't have here because they're really hard to mix certain colors.
Right.
They're just not bright enough sometimes. Once you mix them, every time you mix colors, the intensity goes down. So if you can keep them more pure, and you know, they've worked it out in the manufacturers worked out how to keep them nice and vibrant. So rather than getting very frustrated, sometimes I'll go with specific colors like pinks and sometimes purples. It's really hard to mix and match without, well, just to get it right. But I do use this more, you know, this, what I've got in here is pretty much what I use for most of my painting. Now tomorrow in my in-person class, we are, I often have people bring what they want to paint, right? And then we do some specific practices, but everybody's working on their own paintings of something that interests them. But in this case, we're doing it a little differently, where we're painting through something all together, like step by step, so they feel like they've got a handle on it. So we're doing these irises out in the garden in that color. I realized after I'd already kind of decided that's what we're doing, it's really kind of hard to get the right color.
Is
So,
that your Pittsburgh Rec Center class?
yeah, it's through the Rec Center.
Well,
And
that's
you don't have to
again-
be from Pittsburgh to
Right.
take it, but they do get a week's jump on signing up.
And do they start again for the summer, the Pittsburgh Rec Center?
No, I can't do it there in the summer because the kids are out of school and they use the classrooms. So I don't do summer, but I'm going to start up again in the fall. I've been doing like fall through spring, and this time I did 2 in the spring. And we broke it into 2 4-week classes. Typically it's a 6-week class. Now I'm just adding more water here and just kind of letting one area like get thinner there. But, okay, so some of the same color, might add a little bit more orange to it, but I can come up and do some of these little nooks and crannies that will make it start taking shape.
Because up to this point, your peaches are all a single color, correct?
They were basically a
basically
single
the-
color. I had a little bit more pigment in some areas,
Right.
but yeah. And if I don't want it this, like, this is too crisp probably here, right? But I'm going to be coming over with more color and hopefully it'll soften as I go. But if I wanted to soften, I could just like wipe out my brush, and with a thirsty brush, I'm just going to run along the side like that. Soften it. But there's not a whole lot of color going on. I might want to punch it up a little bit, so we'll see here. Maybe while it's wet, I'm going to drop in a little bit
Are you
of other
finding
color.
this a lot harder to do because it's not your regular way of painting?
No, I mean, it's not different. It's just that I would typically cover the whole thing before I kept going with these details. It's not hard at all. So I might as well, I'm going to just go ahead. I see like a line, but I don't want it to end up looking like a line, right? But I see where that edge is. And I'm just going to go ahead and put them in, and then I'm going to rinse out my brush. And again, that same thing. Take most of the moisture out, and I can lay it sort of on its side and run it along so that it has a sharp edge, but then the rest of it's going to be soft. Just softens that other edge.
When you're working at home alone, do you find yourself talking your way through it?
I do.
It's so
I
valuable. Your stream of consciousness is so helpful to us. And I thought, when you're working alone in your studio, is it total silence, or are you talking your way through it?
Sometimes I talk to my paintings.
I think.
Oh, you know, I think you need a little bit more red over here.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Who else is gonna listen to us ramble on about it?
That's right. That's right.
Does it ever talk back?
Not yet, but that day's coming. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
then we're in trouble.
We don't have to listen.
Again, wherever that's it.
You're fine. No, you're.
Wherever I see a line I don't want, I just grab my water and I just run along the edge there to soften it.
Mm.
And then, these aren't done either. I'll just keep coming back in, and how do I know when it's done? It's when the value's right, when I feel like the color is intense enough or dull enough, whichever I'm going for, and the value is right. And so I just, once I get a few things on my palette, I find I just grab all different things. You know, I'm not being too picky at this point. It's like, oh, I want a little bit more brown, or I want a little bit more red. And I'll just grab various things off of there. There was more text on this jar, but I didn't feel like drawing all that type in, and I thought, well, I'll just use where it says ball, because that's what everybody knows for the... Now, of course, you can just go right over something you've already put paint on, right? You can just go over it, another glaze.
When you're layering for shadow or depth, do you sometimes use the same color and just layer over the same
Sometimes,
to
but
just darken it?
But I kind of like to switch it up a little,
Right.
but I do that,
can do that.
especially in the beginning, like where this has
Yes.
more pigment, you know. It might be the same color like this.
Do you always lift off color with your brush, or do you ever use paper towel?
I do sometimes use paper towel. It depends upon, you know, if I'm trying to get a different effect or texture, or like I'll just fold it over till it makes a nice smooth round spot. If I want to, you know, like something
Around.
stop the paint from rushing in. I forgot what color I had there on my brush. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I'm coming back in with more of my really warm yellow, mainly New Gamboge, I think, here. Now I've kind of lost track whether I kind of intermix either New Gamboge or Hands of Yellow Deep, and they might not be perfect matches, but I kind of use them that way. So I don't know which one went into this well last, but it's one of those. So now I want to make sure it's not all just one color. So I'm taking, this is mainly water, and I'm dragging the water towards the paint. Towards the paint. The other thing with watercolor, those of you that work with it know that it's tricky to get that balance right sometimes. It's just practice, you know, how much water is on your brush. If you have too much water on your brush and your paint down here is damp, your paper's damp, and you put too much water down next to it, you get those blooms, that, you know, you have to get that balance right.
It's intuitive.
Well, yeah, you know, it takes a little bit of practice.
After a while.
But you know what? You're better off if you're not going at it fearfully. Like, you just want to go for it. The worst thing you can do is be like, oh, I only want some tiny bit. Because you can always go like this and pull it right off, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal, and, you know, it's just have fun with it.
It's only paper.
No, they can't see it from the top view. I can see the paper starting to buckle a little bit under where it.
That's because
Is
it's
that-
140 pound.
Right.
It's buckling, but it will flatten back out. I have my
Yes.
paper all stapled into this. I love
Saw
these
that.
gator boards. They're
Yep.
very lightweight, great for going to classes. They last like 20, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
That one looks
And-
new.
What's that?
That looks new.
This one is newer. I have quite a few boards now. But you can staple right into it and they pop right out easily. They
Nice.
don't wreck your board. You can just do it over and over and over on both sides of it. So I love that. And then you got to hook it down. If you don't staple it down, you should tape it down all the way around the edge. If you're just tacking it, then that warp won't go out of your paper. But this will flatten right out again because as it dries, it's held tight. A lot of people, I mean, some people still do, but most people don't still stretch their watercolor paper where they wet it first and soak it for a while and then put it down and let it dry. I used to do that years ago, but the way I work, it really wasn't necessary. But I think that first layer does help to kind of break it up a little bit so that it goes down smoother. So, all right. I'm losing track of what I'm doing here. They look like kind of egg yolks in here, to be honest.
They do.
They look like, I got a jar full of egg yolks. I want a little bit more red to it.
Do you tend to err towards more color than less?
I think I do, and here's one thing to remember, that you can always tone down too bright. You cannot get back too dull. You can't get the brightness back once it's dull. You can improve it. You can even put like a bright yellow over something that's already darker, and it will improve it if your problem is that, you know, you've kind of lost the light. But it's so much easier to work a little bit brighter and then tone down areas that you want to tone down. So I'm looking at my paper, and I usually stick my finger wherever I'm going, so as I go back and forth, I kind of don't have to go, okay, where was I again? So my drawing doesn't match perfectly because it was a drawing, not a tracing, so I have a little bit more peach back here. I wanted to fill it up a little bit more, so that it's just not a perfect match, but I can tell what I need to do back here, which is just.
But that doesn't matter because it's not a portrait.
That's right. So, but I get the clues from like, okay,
Right.
It's in shadow here, so this is a little darker area here than the other peaches in the front. I just had trouble seeing
It does
that.
show up on the video clear. I think the projector loses a lot of the color
it's light in here
definition because it's,
probably.
yeah.
So you mean when we go to the
The
site,
se- It'll be a little brighter. Yeah, it's showing. It's
Sure.
looking pretty good on the screen actually.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
I wish there were more colors in this, to be honest, but.
Make some.
I will,
Pick it up.
I think what I'll do is
Rotten
I'll do a
peaches.
little bit of the fabric. So fabric is fun to do because you want to keep it really, you want it to look soft, right? So even though I might put some lines in there, I'll use this mop brush.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's just gonna, and I often change the colors in my fabric, but this I'll probably keep sort of similar. And I'm just going to pay attention to the more orangey reds, and I'll start with the lighter, and this is.
But if you change the color in the fabric, then that impacts the color.
Yes, I would. If I change it drastically, I have to think about what's bouncing up, what's happening. In this case, you know, so I see it's just kind of a. I'm going to take cover there. I'm just going to cover everything first, because then I'll come back in, and I'll put another color on top.
That
to
seems
make
like such a
stripes
large.
separate.
That brush seems so large for doing that. But I can see where it works. So yeah, that brush is big.
Well, because I want it to hold as
Yeah.
much as possible, and I don't
I
have
see
to be
that.
super careful here.
Right.
It comes to a point.
Yeah, that's great.
Comes to a point that I can, and there's not even any shadow here going on. The shadow is over here this way,
Mm.
so I can just have to be careful around these edges. Now, some people might mask this whole thing off. There's an amazing watercolor artist. Are you guys familiar with Lauren McCracken? It's a guy, Lauren McCracken. He does these exquisite, like silver and lace and all this stuff, and he does these jars too, and he masks everything off. Like he masks every little outside edge and remasks and remasks. And I tried, I watched something he did once, and I tried to do it, and I thought, this is not me.
Yeah.
I'm not having fun when I'm spending all my time cutting out masks.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rather just do it by hand.
Sure.
Now, there's going to be the shadow there, but first I'm just laying down that fabric, that first coat, what I see is something that, if I squint, it's something about like that value and roughly that color. And I'm going to go right under, like even though that looks like a black shadow under the apple, I'm just putting that same fabric color down first, and then I'll come over it with something else when I want to put that shadow down. It's just, I don't have to worry that it's not perfectly even, because it's fabric. I want it to look a little bit, like maybe I even want to mess it up a little bit more, like, so it's not perfect. or I want it to contrast the glass, the hard edge of the glass.
Did you ever use white paint, or is that a universal no-no?
White watercolor paint.
Oh, yeah, that's, well, if you ask somebody who's trained in Chinese watercolor painting, they use it a lot, but they don't use it, well, people I know, it might not be everybody, they don't use it purely white as much as to mix in with colors to get a certain kind of texture, I think. At least person I've taught, I took a class from once. But in general, you don't want to paint white. It's opaque. This is transparent watercolor, which, to keep it transparent, I heard, this was just about a week ago, I heard that, some places are really fussy with their shows, like the Transparent Watercolor Society of America is one of them. You can't even sign your name with white, or it's disqualified. Somebody, I heard about a show that was in Japan, I think. Somebody got into the show, shipped their work all the way over there for this really big show, and they had used Naples yellow, which is opaque.
Oh.
Too opaque.
Too opaque.
They wouldn't let it in the show after sending it all the way there. That's too much. I think that's being a little too persnickety. Now, I don't really care for that, but it's not going to make a difference. You can see how that dried differently. So I'm going to just come in. It's not going to make a difference when I'm done adding the other stripes and things, but I'll just go in. Usually you want to leave things alone when they dry all the way. But, yeah.
Just be aware of your time.
Oh, wow. Look how neat it is.
Looks
Okay.
cleaning up in
All right, well,
5 or 10 minutes.
definitely not going to be done.
Yeah.
So you tend to make deeper colors with layers
Yes.
as opposed to using more pigment with the water.
Yes, I like using lots of layers. I'm going to go ahead and just put the yellow at the base of this apple in, right? And here's a case where I could take this paper towel. I should have masked. I didn't want to mask it, but I should have paid more attention. If I do that, it stops the water, and the paint only goes where the water is. So it won't go in there anywhere that it already is. So I'm just going to put this down because this is typically what I would do is I'd make sure this was covered with this first layer of really bright yellowy green, or it's cool yellow, so it leans towards green, right? And then I'll be going in, and it's got to be shaped, the form shadows have to be put in and things like that, but that will be another layer. But it was easier to just throw that in right now, so I did. I always tape, if I tape, sometimes I forget, I always tape about 1/4 of an inch outside of my border so that lots of the accidents, the problems, the backwashes start to happen near your tape. So by backing off, that's one reason. You can usually grab the problem and correct it, or also when you go to frame it and mat it, you don't have like a little edge that's not perfectly lined up, so you've gone beyond your edges. But I wouldn't have to tape it to keep it down. I just do it to keep a clean edge. Okay. Well, I don't have to keep, I'm not going to be able to add too much. How about, anybody got questions?
Yeah.
How do you do the texture on the cloth?
I'm not going to try to get every little weave in there, but what I do is, like, if you go over layers kind of not carelessly, but you're not trying to be real defined. You leave the edges a little softer and looser and put overlapping layers on, and it just starts to look like cloth because that's what's happening with the cloth itself. You have got those little weaves. So if you put your brush on there like that, I probably should have done a little bit more. But that's all it is. It's being a little looser with the cloth, and then lots of layers. Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't finish painting, but
No, it's fantastic.
when I finish it, I will do something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you hold the painting up so we can see it?
Yes. The yellow is a little wet, so we'll see. Hopefully, let me see if I can get the worst of it, so it doesn't run down there. But does it look different color-wise?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to hold it up here?
Sure. Thanks.
Can you turn the lights up a little bit there, the white switch? Just push all the. Just
The
call me
yellow's
your name.
gonna run. Mark,
Mark,
flat.
Tibbet. Here, I got this picture out here. I
The
can-
yellow.
Yeah, you do.
It was so wet.
But I mean,
You didn't get
if you're
outside.
painting in a sunny room or a
It's
well-lit
fine.
room, it's
It'll be
gonna
fine.
be hard to paint in that dull.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Very
Thank
Thank you.